Hello and welcome to the Heaven Bound Sunday School class at the First General Baptist Church in Truman. We will read from Luke chapter 24 and we will just pick up literally in the very next verse from the scripture we read in last week's video. And to recap just very briefly, last week the women had gone to the tomb to prepare Jesus' body for proper burial. His body was gone. He had resurrected. The tomb was empty. The women went back to the place where the disciples and other followers of Jesus were congregated together. They told them of where they had gone and what they had found. And Scripture tells us that most of the people felt that their story was nonsense or just idle talk, didn't really believe it. Of course, we know that Peter, for one, went and verified everything that had happened. But in the meantime, where we're going to pick up our scripture today, a couple of followers of Jesus are headed to a town called Emmaus, which is about 7 miles from Jerusalem. Now we'll read the scripture. And it says, "And behold, two of them went that same day to a village called Emmaus, which was from Jerusalem about 60 furlongs. And they talked together of all these things which had happened. And it came to pass that while they communed together and reasoned, Jesus himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were holden that they should not know him. And he said unto them, What manner of communications are these that ye have one to another as ye walk and are sad? And the one of them, whose name was Cleophas, answered, said unto him, Art thou only a stranger in Jerusalem, and hast not known the things which are come to pass there in these days? And he said unto them, What things? And they said unto him, Concerning Jesus of Nazareth, which was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to be condemned to death and have crucified him. But we trusted that it had been he which should have redeemed Israel. And beside all this, today is the 3rd day since these things were done. Yea, and certain women also of our company made us astonished, which were early at the sepulchre. And when they found not his body, they came, saying that they had also seen a vision of angels, which said that he was alive. And certain of them which were with us went to the sepulchre, and found it even so as the women had said, but him they saw not. Then he said unto them, O fools, and slow of heart, to believe that the prophets have spoken. Ought not Christ to have suffered these things, and to enter into his glory? And beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded unto them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. And it came to pass, as he sat at meat with them, he took bread and blessed it and brake and gave to them, and their eyes were opened, and they knew him, and he vanished out of their sight." So as I said earlier, the two followers are headed to this small village outside of Jerusalem, and as they're going along, they are talking about the things which had just happened. And it says it came to pass that while they communed together and reasoned, or in other words, as they talked about the arrest and the trial and the crucifixion and the burial and the resurrection, as they talked about all these things, as they walked along, Jesus himself drew near and walked with them. Now, the two men did not recognize Jesus. Verse 16 tells us, but their eyes were holden that they should not know him. Now, the fact that the two were kept from recognizing Jesus could mean either that God obscured their vision in some way, or that Jesus' physical appearance was somewhat changed from before his burial. Another possibility is that the two were so engaged in conversation that they failed to recognize Jesus. The two had no reason to think that this other traveler would have special insight regarding the previous week's events, and they certainly didn't expect it to be Jesus. Now, Jesus asked them some questions, some prodding questions. He knew the answers to these questions, but he wanted to start a dialogue with these two men. He says, like, why are you so sad? Why are you have this disappointed look on your face. And above all that, what are you talking about? Now, the scripture tells us that, at least identifies one of the two men as Cleophas. And he basically rebukes Jesus and says, how have you not heard of what has happened? You're a visitor here, apparently, and you don't know, you haven't heard of the things that have happened. And Jesus, again, knowing the answer to all these questions, he says, what things? Who are you talking about? And that's when the men answered, we're talking about Jesus of Nazareth. And that's a phrase that's used about 15 times in the New Testament. We know that Jesus was from Nazareth, and that's how he's referred to many times. But they said, that's who we're talking about, Jesus of Nazareth. He was a prophet, and he's powerful in word and deed before God and before all the people. They went on to say to Jesus that the chief priests and even our rulers, they conspired to sentence him to death, and they had him crucified. They went on to say that they had hoped that Jesus was going to redeem Israel. Not only had the travelers been confused by Jesus' death, but they had also been confounded by the reports earlier in the day. Faithful women traveled to the tomb at daybreak, but they did not find the body of Jesus. They did, however, report a vision of angels who claimed Jesus was alive. Some of the larger group traveled to the tomb, where they discovered the setting as the women had described. These men did not find Jesus. They did not find angels in the empty tomb. Now, eventually, Jesus rebukes the men. He reacts. Perhaps he stops them in mid-sentence. However he did it, he sternly calls them to task for their lack of understanding. The translation fools is unfortunate because it takes on such a negative use in our modern culture. The word Jesus used is a compound word made up of a or not and Noah, of grasping, seeing, understanding. It refers to their lack of understanding, not their capacity for thinking and reasoning. Jesus just believed they were slow to believe. Now, as Jesus had done previously, he once again explained the life and ministry of the Messiah by using Old Testament prophets. We don't know which selections he quoted, and it seems unlikely that he could have been comprehensive in their short conversation. It does seem obvious, however, that he used enough of the familiar passages to convey the important truth that God had a plan in the Messiah's life, the Messiah's death, and the Messiah's resurrection. Now, once they got to their destination, the two men invited Jesus to eat. That was a common bit of hospitality in that culture, and Jesus accepted that invitation. They went in to eat. During the meal, the scripture tells us that Jesus took bread and he blessed it and brake the bread and gave to them. And once this happened, the scripture tells us their eyes were opened and they recognized Jesus. And once they recognized Jesus, he disappeared from their sight. Now, the confusion and disappointment of these travelers was obvious. Sharing their confusion and disappointment undoubtedly helped them cope. The same may be true for us. When we verbalize our confusion and disappointment, two important things might happen. First, just by expressing it aloud, we may find some clarity of thought we had not discovered earlier. When there is no one to talk with, we can sometimes gain that clarity by writing down our concerns, writing down our questions, writing down our feelings. Now, secondly, by talking with someone else, we may find comfort in the fact that others share the same confusion or disappointment. The wise counselor or friend will help us see that our confusion or disappointment may simply be the common lot of life in a fallen, imperfect world.